All right, let's take you back now to one of our top stories, of course, looking at the issue of the Employment Equity Act. As we said there earlier, that the Democratic Alliance is taking this as a court challenge and looking, of course, at some of the regulations. And, of course, the party saying that they are not meeting constitutional muster. They are certainly unconstitutional, and for them could lead, in fact, to quite a number of people being unemployed as opposed to increasing employment. And also, they say that, the party saying that this, in fact, also impacts unemployment in the country. So let's have this conversation and speak to Galeboi Modisapodi, who is an employment law consultant and also employee relations advisor and accredited commercial mediator, joining us this evening. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. When you look at the DA's papers, for example, it says that the Minister of Employment and Labour would acquire the power to set numerical targets for the demographic composition of any designated employer, which includes any private sector employer employing about 50 people or more, every municipality and every organ or state. But the DA is arguing that the term numerical targets is a misnomer, in that what the minister sets is not a target, but in fact that the employer must aim to meet quotas instead. Is that correct?
Well, it's not entirely correct, and in fact it seems to be a stretch of the definitions. When you look at, and I think just reading their papers, they've made a case around what the Employment Equity Act scheme was before the amendments, and comparing it to what the amendments entail. And their stretching of its implications is that it effectively means the numerical targets set by the minister are actually quotas. Now, quotas are by law outlawed because quotas are considered to be rigid and inflexible, so whereas the targets are meant to be flexible to accommodate the realities of the economy as well as the businesses. So just a simple reading would suggest that it might be a bit of a stretch of the definition.
I'm keen to hear your thoughts on another argument they make, right, in their papers, as now you've mentioned about the past. They say that, in the past, each employer's designated equity plan would contain numerical goals appropriate for that employer's situation, the needs and specific labor market that is faced by the employer. But they say that there now appears to be a one-size-fits-all approach.
Well, the context to that is that you have to look at what the picture looks like after about 20 years of Employment Equity Act. So the most recent reports from the Employment Equity Commission suggest that there's about 37% compliance in terms of reporting annually. And when you look at the analysis that has been done, effectively, there's not a lot of progress done over the years at a number of levels. Mm-hmm. You look at top management, for example, 63.2% representation is by white males. At senior management is about 31.4%. But at lower levels generally, and this has been a trend, whether one practiced as an employer, representative, or even as a lawyer, that the numbers are skewed. You have high representation at top levels that are for white males specifically, and very high representation for Africans at lower levels. And over time, that has not been changed drastically at all. Mm-hmm. And I think what the DA's case does not seem to take account of is that previously, before the amendments, it was left to employers to set their own targets. But after 20 years, the number is still the same. You still have a representation of white and Indians basically having a monopoly of access to skills development, to promotion, as well as skills training opportunities. So it is on that basis that I suppose the approach has been to then set targets that should then be matched by the employers.
Two questions then arise from that, especially when you look at what the president had to say. I'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to stay with something that the DA is quoting in its papers as well, which, it's the party is talking about the solidarity report. And in that report, it quotes the argument that the draft targets cannot be implemented unless the economy can grow at an impossible rate over the next 5 years. What do you make of this argument?
Well, let's look at it this way. In the last 20, 25 years, the the profile of unemployment, poverty, and access to skill has not changed. It's largely African. It's largely African females, predominantly followed by African males. So that picture has changed despite the economic growth at whatever low percentages we've had over the same period. And what I did not read in the papers by the DA is what is the alternative to address that? So it tempts one to look at the context for this challenge. And if you look at it geopolitically, it has a direct relation to what's happening with the alleged white farmer genocide in South Africa. It has some relation to do with the challenge against critical race theory globally driven by the US. So the context to it suggests that the issue is not per se the good intentions of the legislation, but a questioning of the entire pedagogy of the legislation itself,
so
which is a different issue altogether.
Yeah, when you look at what the president had to say in his letter today, right, he talks about employment equity and how the commission, of course, shows how far we need to work as a country when it comes to race-based disparities in the economy. But he also says that employment equity is not the only area where challenges remain. He says that the International Labour Organization has highlighted problems of compliance with labor laws in South Africa. Would you agree with this?
Well, the report suggests that there's only about 34% compliance by employers. So that number speaks for itself and complies in terms of the submission of reports. When you then look at the details in terms of what progress has been made, after a period of 20 years, there is no doubt that there's a need for a different approach to improving the profile of the labor market, the profile of the workforce across industry. Yeah. And this is but one approach that the ministry, through the NETLAC process, has decided to follow. What I did not see in the papers by the DA, and I've only had access to the DA papers, it has nothing to do with what is the alternative short of what it considers to be shortcomings in the current legislative changes.
And I'm keen to hear your thoughts post the arguments in court there to see, as we look at other papers as well, because there's still quite a lot of questions about this particular matter. But I appreciate your time this evening, and hopefully we'll speak again just as the case, of course, continues. Galeboi Modisapodi, the employment law consultant, employee relations advisor, and accredited commercial mediator.